Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What is the creepiest thing you've seen in the woods, mountains, deserts, caves, rural towns, odd locations, on an aircraft or a vessel, or you name the place? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. This took place in the Australian bush around 10 to 11 at night. I was 17, leading a staggered column of about 60 cadets to our detachment campsite. Due to light discipline rules, only myself at the very front of the group and the other flight commander at the rear had torches on. This was so that any vehicles coming along the trail could see us, and so that most of the cadets could maintain their night vision. We were camouflaged up and thus difficult to see at night. As we walked along, I periodically looked to my sides and kept seeing what looked like dewdrops on the ground, almost like tiny blue gems glinting in my torchlight either side of the road. I had to maintain my position in the formation, so I couldn't get a good look at what they were. However, after a while, we stopped for a very brief break, and I took the opportunity to have a closer look. Walking over to the side of the trail, I spotted a small cluster of the diamonds and focused my head torch on them. Rather than seeing diamonds or dewdrops or anything remotely pleasant, I instead saw a group of about 5 large spiders just crouching in the leaf litter and staring at me. They looked like huntsmen, which are about the size of an adult's hand. Sweeping my head around, I realized there were thousands of the things all over the ground, some of the trunks of trees and everywhere around me glaring at the light affixed to my head. I had a very brisk walk back to the formation and attempted to play it cool while screaming in my head. Being a massive arachnophobe, I have no effing clue how I managed to set up a tent and spend the next week in that cursed forest. I was Boy Scout, camping with my group of older buddies and an adult leader in Yellowstone. We had been backpacking for 2 days and stopped in a beautiful little clearing at the bottom of some huge tree-covered hills. The sun started to set. We made a fire, and I began to climb up into the trees to dig a hole and fill it back up. You know what I mean. As I squat there, basking in the moonlight and appreciating the glow of fire among the trees, I look up to a ridgeline a few hundred yards away where the moon was rising, and I shit you not, I saw a damn big cougar crest the hill and just watch our fire. It was likely no danger to me, but seeing that outline, that unmistakable shoulder crawl they do, was haunting. I watched it sit there for a good 15 minutes until I was called back by my worried buds. I pointed the cat out to them when I got done because I was still just watching us. Crazy. My girlfriend and I were hiking along some abandoned railroad tracks, and we get to a small bridge going over a little creek. I'm about to go explore under the bridge when she points something out. I look over, and in the woods across from us I see a guy. I'm like, whatever, and keep headed down to the creek area, and then the guy stands up and he's naked. We immediately backtrack pretty quickly to get away from there, and once we're like 1 minute down the trail, I look back, and this naked dude is just standing in the middle of the trail, watching us walk away. Walking on the beach with my boyfriend, and we had walked to a giant rocky cliff to make out. Somebody was just gazing at the ocean, crying and shaking. Mind you, this is late at night, like around 9:30 p.m. We asked him if he was okay. He apologized and practically ran back down the cliff, away from the dangerous areas. My boyfriend and I watched him until he reached the public area and decided to call it a night. I'm pretty sure he was going to jump. In order to get back home from a popular kebab restaurant, I need to walk a short path through the woods. Along the way, there's an extremely old, abandoned, partially collapsed chapel, and occasionally I'll stand there for a few seconds admiring it. It's quite beautiful in its own way. One day, during winter season, I decided to rest there for a minute, so I placed my kebab on the bench right next to the chapel and just stood there, taking in the scenery. It was already rather dark, and the woods were almost completely silent. But right as I was about to continue my walk, I heard footsteps rapidly getting louder. It was a child running towards me, and as soon as it realized I was there, it started to repeatedly scream, "Run, he's coming," or variations of that same sentiment. I was a bit perplexed by the situation, so I watched the child run past me without moving an inch myself. It didn't take another second for a much more weighty pair of footsteps to appear. I could make out a silhouette in the distance, which seemed to be their origin at the exact point in time I got really scared. As opposed to running, I decided to hide in the chapel next to the altar, and after tripping over an old broken chapel bench, I reached my hiding place. The footsteps got louder and louder, but right as they approached the vicinity of the chapel, they suddenly went silent. About 15 seconds of complete quietness had passed just for the words, "Oi, you effing idiot left your kebab on the bench," to break the silence. Turns out, it was a resident of the very same street I inhabit. His nephew was visiting, and he wanted to race him to the kebab stand. I don't know whether this was the right place to post this. Ultimately, this is the most stupid than creepy.
Well, better to be safe than sorry, I guess. So, there's that.
My friend and I were chilling in the woods one day back in high school and see a dog walking by, later followed by this kid. He looked troubled, so we asked if he needed help. He obliged, telling us he was dog sitting for his friend and the dog got loose. So we spent a good hour following this dog and kid around, going deeper and deeper into the woods. Eventually, I finally got the dog to come to me, but it wasn't wearing a collar, so I wasn't able to get a hold. My friend and I look away for just a few seconds to go discuss strategy, and when we turn back around, the boy and the dog are both gone. It was like they completely vanished. Keep in mind, it was autumn, so any footsteps could be heard from quite afar. But it was just silent. Not a single trace of them anywhere. Still don't really know what happened. Maybe they ran away real quick? Who knows? It was definitely enough to creep us out though. I was hiking in northern Quebec, doing some exploration work for geologists. The thing about northern Quebec is that it has forests, mountains, hills, pretty much all green, black, and gray. Except that in the middle of a forest we hiked through, we found this strange all-yellow patch of grass in a perfect circle, about the diameter of a medium-sized house. It was almost perfectly flat too. Caught us off guard. When I was about 7 or 8, my parents sent me to a local summer camp that they would pick me up from in the afternoons. I never really liked it because the kids were mean, everything was either broken or not clean, and the counselors obviously didn't care. I remember the girls' changing room had a door that led out of the woods, but the doorknob was gone, so it was unlocked all the time, and you could see into it. This was primarily where the girls changed into their bathing suits, and there was usually someone blocking the view while we changed, so the boys couldn't look in. Well, one day I'm changing alone, and someone wasn't blocking the door. I look over and see an eye peeping in through the hole watching me change. I pull the rest of my clothes back on quickly and run out to tell my twin brother. I tell my dad that I don't want to go back to that camp anymore, and he begrudgingly takes us out of the camp pretty soon after because he knew how much we hated it. Years later, the camp has been closed down for many, many years, and I'm asking my dad about it. He gets really grim and tells me it shut down because a 13-year-old boy had RAPED'd a 7-year-old girl in the woods right behind the girl's bathroom a few weeks after I told him about someone watching me change. I was walking with family when I was little, and we came across a sheep's head. No body or blood, just a severed sheep's head on the path. It was the first time I noticed sheep's eyes have slit pupils, and think my first contact with something so gruesome. Was working in a forest in East Africa for a while. Was getting seriously dark, and we were hiking back to the car. The wind was quite strong, but you could still hear some ruffling in the leaves as I turned around. I saw something quite big in the shrubs. It was an effing leopard. I shrieked, and some guy from the group shot into the air to scare the animal away. I'm glad he didn't shoot the animal, but was still glad when the animal bolted out of there. I was jogging at night with headphones on in a park with dense trees and bushes. The overgrowth was taking over the path and it was difficult to see, so I turned the flashlight on my phone on. I started to see a fire burning ahead but couldn't really make it out. I take my glasses off when I jog. As I got closer, there's a clearing and I see a big fire raging and no one around. So I pause a minute and fish my glasses out and find out that yes, there's 6 people standing there actually, perfectly spaced apart from each other, and they all turned at the same time to look at me. I turned 180 and sprinted the F out of there.
Some advice from an old man. If you're doing a lot of trail running in the woods or rural areas, you need all your senses active, so let's keep the music off.
This was quite a few years ago now, but me and my friend had this really cool spot to hang out in the woods. You had to walk in the middle of a creek for a kilometer and duck through sharp bushes and thistles. The hike was well rewarding though. The spot was about half an acre big. It was pure green grass on an incline with beautiful clear water ponds everywhere. There were tons of wildlife and the butterflies lived there. So there was always tons of butterflies. So the story begins on the way to this place. My friend Levi and I were walking along the river on the way to the spot. It was in the middle of a valley and nobody else ever went down there. Suddenly, Levi stopped moving and ducked into a bush. I did the same because I thought there must be a large animal somewhere. I saw him staring up the hill, and so I looked up too. There was two people standing at the top of the hill, heaving back and forth a lifeless body. We watched as they threw the lifeless corpse down the hill as it bounced off the trees and eventually got stuck on a tree at the bottom. Then they took off. Me and him were terrified, and I was shaking so badly I couldn't speak, so we decided to verify it was a real body. Levi got about 4 feet away before screaming, "It has nostrils! It's real, run!" So of course we take off running, and I glance back to see the two people run back to the top of the hill. Me and him ran 2 kilometers through thick brush and trees to get away from them. The next day, we were with his parents driving to town, and we saw like 10 fire trucks at the school closest to the forest. Terrified, we told his parents, bawling our eyes out, worried that we're going to get murdered. His mom started laughing at us and said, "They're training for search and rescue. That was a dummy that the firemen had to find." I never slept as good as I did that night. In Auburn, Alabama in 2008, it was Halloween and we Googled haunted houses. I can't remember what the website was like or if there even was one, but it was like 45 minutes away. I know that it wasn't like a big attraction and we figured it was on someone's land and would be like a local deal. We drove out there at like 10 p.m. This was before iPhones and GPS, so we had MapQuest directions. We ended up going down a pretty country road for a while with no streetlights, then turned down a legit dirt road that went through the woods, pitch black. Went down it for like 10 minutes and finally saw an old house with a sign by the driveway that was handwritten and said, "Haunted House." No other cars or lights or people anywhere. We pulled into the driveway and sat there for a second like, alright, this is effed up. We should leave. All of a sudden, an old pickup truck turned on about 15 feet in front of us facing us, lights shining right in our faces. It started driving towards us down their own driveway. We backed out and peeled out. It followed us, like almost bumping our rear end, right on our tail down this pitch black dirt road in the middle of the Alabama woods. We were flipping our shit. It was Texas Chainsaw Massacre Hills Have Eyes stuff. He stayed out of our tail, blinding us and almost bumping us all the way back home until we got off our exit and he finally let us go. No idea who was driving. I always think what would have happened if we got out of the car when we were in that driveway.
I don't know, maybe it was all part of the haunted house. Did you go back? Would you?
In a patch of trees off a field near where I keep my horse, there's one of those big oil drums sealed up with a very heavy boulder on top. The only way it could have got there is being placed by a tractor or some sort of heavy lifting equipment. My partner and I tried to push it off, but no luck. I don't know why, but it creeps me out every time I see it. I regularly walk my dogs past it to see if they show any interest, but honestly, after watching them look for a toy that was clearly in my lap, I'm not sure I have much faith in them anymore. Camping with 3 girls at a campsite far out in the woods with nobody else around for miles. The temp had dropped to 39 degrees Fahrenheit and we were freezing our asses off after tripping on shrooms all day and smoking to keep warm. We heard a weird laughter and then screaming in the woods near us. It was actually terrifying because we couldn't identify if it was a child or something else. When I was a kid, I used to live on a tiny property in the woods. My house was basically built around where stables were once. My room was back when it was still stables, where the hay was stocked. Before getting to the creepy thing, I need to say some other stuff. When you were in my room, you could sometimes smell hay out of nowhere. My dog was always refusing to go upstairs because something was scaring the shit out of it there. You could sometimes hear knocking on doors. There were 3 entrance doors in my house, sometimes all at once. Now that has been said, we can go to the fun thing. So, my room had a big-ass window that gave a big view over the woods, and my garden was basically a clearing. Once, I effing heard a kid giggling from upstairs. I ran there only to find my window open, and something running out in the woods. I spent 2 more years in that house and effing felt insecure the whole time. I was in a large wooded area near my boyfriend's home with him, hanging out nearly at midnight. We had gone in pretty deep, and it required a good amount of climbing. The closest path was maybe 5 to 7 minutes climbing down, so it was highly unlikely someone could be at that spot that time of night, besides us. As we were kissing and stuff, he thought he saw a shadow move 20 to 25 feet to the left of us, climbing, but it stopped suddenly when my boyfriend looked at it. He told me to be wary, and that exact moment we saw a dark figure climbing a little up but diagonally, like he tried to go directly above where we were. We didn't move and watch him till he closed the horizontal gap and was directly above us, maybe 15 feet of steep downhill thick forest. Then he began to come toward us. Without skipping a beat, my boyfriend grabbed my hand and we almost ran downhill till the path. We made it in less than 2 minutes while still holding hands and listening to the man running behind us. We ran as fast as we could down the path and out of the forest, where there was a cafe and some basketball and tennis courts next to the wooded hill, and of course, people. As we realized we came really close to being mugged or worse, we vowed never to go there at night again. When I was younger, I went elk hunting with my uncle and some of his friends, and had an experience I'll never forget. One of the days I went on a hunt with his buddy Tyler. Tyler gets an elk down about 30 minutes before dark. We get over to it, and as we're cleaning it, we start hearing wolves howl in the distance, slowly getting closer. Every minute that passes, the smell of death gets thicker, the sky gets darker, and the wolves get closer. It's dark now. All I can see is what's directly in the beam of my mini mag light and Tyler's hat bill light as he works on the elk as fast as he can while I keep a watch on the wolves. We're surrounded. I don't know how many there are, feels like dozens. It was probably only a few. I can hear them running circles around us and yelping back and forth at each other. Occasionally, I get sight of them in the light and then they are gone. Every once in a while, one would get brave and dart in within a few feet and try snagging a piece of the elk. Finally, the elk is cleaned, and we have the scent circle around the carcass to keep it somewhat safe. Now all that was left was a 3-mile hike back to camp, completely covered in blood and being trailed by wolves. By far the most horrifying experience of my life. Small town in a relatively rural area. A few years after the fact, I'm now relatively certain it was a skinwalker. About 10 years ago, I was at my dad's house for the weekend in Kentucky. The Appalachian people are very superstitious, hailing from the Scots-Irish people and just never losing that side of them. My dad wasn't superstitious, I thought, and was not one to be easily scared. It was about, 10 at night, and we randomly decided to go into town to get some McDonald's. Daddy always insisted on walking in front of me, and I always assumed it was so I wouldn't accidentally step on a snake. But now, I don't think that's the case. So, he turned on the porch light and opened the screen door. He had put one foot on the porch, and there was this god-awful sound. I will never in my life forget it. There was a screech, followed by the sound of a crow, but it wasn't a crow. The best way I can describe it is if a person was mimicking a crow call. My hair stood up on the back of my neck, and my dad retreated into the house. He slammed the big door and locked it, something I had never seen him do. Before I could ask a question, he said, "It isn't safe. We can go tomorrow morning." And so we did. But the rest of the night, we stayed inside. My dad didn't even go outside to smoke a cigarette. He even let the outside dogs stay in the house. We never talked about that again, but that was one of the scariest moments of my life.